Hello and welcome to Verbal to Visual. I'm your host, Doug Neill, and as you can see, I've got a special guest joining me today. This is Miguel Cabral. I wanted to invite Miguel on because he shared a really cool sketch note inside of Verbal to Visual that I thought was a cool application of this skill that more people needed to hear about, which is why I asked Miguel to hop on to chat about it today. You might recognize Miguel if you keep up with the Verbal to Visual podcast. We had kind of a coaching call conversation about a different project that Miguel was working on. I think the title of that one is Skill Trees and Learning Pathways, some cool things that Miguel is doing to support software engineers that he manages. So go check that out on the pretty new YouTube channel that's just for the podcast. But today we're talking about a totally different but equally cool project that I will throw it to Miguel to tell us a little bit about. And maybe as a way of introducing the project that you took on, if there's any other details about kind of the general work that you do that you feel would be relevant, you can weave those in as well. So yeah, tell us a little bit about the backstory behind this project.
Absolutely. Hi everyone, and thanks, Duke, for having me again. So basically, what I did is that the CEO of our company had seen some of the sketches I have previously made. I showed him a few concepts and also some flow diagrams about some projects we're doing in the company, and he was always very excited. I mean, every time I showed this, and he really liked the format of my presentations. So he was invited to give a webinar for a company here in Mexico called Actimber, and he was invited to give this webinar about how to value a stock and how to know if a stock is cheap or expensive. I mean, we are fintech, so we do a lot of financial analysis, and yeah, I mean that's why he gets invited to things like that. So he asked me if it was possible for us to do something more visual. So I said, yeah, absolutely. So what we did was that he highlighted a bunch of of things from a book. I can't remember the name of the book right now, but it was like the whole chapter. He sent me all these highlights, and from that I kind of start sketching something. So I mean, I was going back and forth with him, and I guess that we kind of together came up with a layout that made sense to him. Like at the moment, I really didn't know a lot of the concepts I was reading, so it was kind of hard for me to know what sketch was best. So he helped me a lot with that, and um, I told him that I had a book from Dan Rome. I think it's the second time I mentioned Dan Rome here, but he has a book called Blah Blah Blah, which talks about how to know how to choose a layout for a presentation depending on what the outcome is, right? So he talks about four kinds of presentations. If you're trying to show someone how to learn something new, there's sort that shows you if you're trying to pitch an idea. There's another one, I think, can't remember the other two types, but I show him this book. He actually bought it, and we kind of went through it together, and we chose what layout we wanted, and that's how we started, right? So he sent me these highlights, then we chose the layout or the template of the presentation, and we just took it from there.
Nice. That sounds like a great way to collaborate on a presentation like this. And even just like thinking about the highlighted chapters or highlighted sections of a chapter of a book, like the type of process that, many of us go through individually. We read something, we highlight it, and then we sketch note it, and then maybe we present it. But to have kind of the back and forth of like someone else highlighted it, you're kind of taking in those highlights and trying to visualize them, and then you're using this other resource, blah blah blah, by Dan Rome, to like pick a presentation template and kind of fit the ideas into that format. It sounds like a fun project to take on with someone else. That's just a different dynamic than, what most of us sketchnoters are probably used to, kind of just working with all these things like only on our own. So to kind of like see that opportunity, because you were kind of sharing more visual things at work, kind of like is what led to your boss even kind of considering like, hey, I've got this presentation coming up. Let's try to make it maybe more visually intriguing than it would be otherwise.
Yeah. I actually
Great.
sent him your video about how you sketchnote and how you do visual summaries of books. So I sent him that
Nice.
too, so he kind of know what we're going to do with that, and then yeah, I mean and also I mean I want to add that I kind of underestimated the effort because I
Yeah,
thought
talk about that.
that I mean it was gonna be like easy just to sketch. I mean I'll do just a few sketches, and then when he sent me the information, I was like, wow. I mean I had no idea I was gonna have to sketch something so complex. So that was one of the issues we faced, and also I mean the audience is used to like really formal presentations, so we were not sure how they were gonna receive it, because it was like really informal. I did like all of the fonts like I mean everything was handwritten, so we thought it was maybe too informal for them, but it was actually a hit. So so yeah, we're happy that
Nice.
we actually took the chance there.
Yeah. Well, so now that we've got kind of a sense for the kind of the backstory that led into this, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen to show the presentation that you created, or at least a version of it. And then I will let you kind of talk through the process by which you created this, and any other kind of like things you want to point out maybe about this presentation that you put together here.
I mean, first we knew that we wanted to show some data about where we are as a country. I mean, here in Mexico, not a lot of people invest. I mean, it is like well, I mean, I feel like a lot of people feel or think that you have to be rich to invest, which is not true. So we want to show some numbers compared to the U.S., which I think it has like better education in terms of personal finance, and that's how we came up with this data. I mean, he actually obtained it from a site called Trade Mania, and he sent me all the numbers. We try to highlight some interesting, I mean, facts like, for example, in the US there are 50 million investment accounts, but 6 million of them were created during like the last 6 months because of COVID.
Wow.
And yeah, I mean that was like a highlight. And then in Mexico, I mean, we found out that there's more people who invest in cryptocurrencies. So there's 1 million of accounts in cryptocurrencies, and then there's only 400,000 accounts in regular investment. So I think that was something really interesting. So I think these ones are not in the right order, but I'll just go through some of the elements. But yeah, like one of the things that we also wanted to make sure was to use like the same symbols all across the presentation to kind of have like this memorability and to know what we're talking about, so that diamond, which represents evaluation, is everywhere in the presentation. And I think I didn't upload, I mean, some of the next steps, but what we did is that we also show like a timeline on top for all the next steps, and that was easy to know where you were, right? So here we introduced some concepts and how we could evaluate a stock, and then gave some definitions about what it meant to do evaluation, what it meant to have an active, and some examples, like a house, a company, a patent. We also explain he also explained a little bit about what an action is, and then after that we kind of went through the process or what you have to do. So I think this one came before the
Yeah,
last,
and seeing the
but
numbers now too, which is helpful. One quick follow-up, or maybe a couple. I apologize for interrupting, but there are already a few interesting things you said. Did you mention that in a future version you included maybe in the top of each slide like a some sort of kind of a progress bar or a thing that indicated where you were in the presentation and where you're going, like with a handful of steps? Is
That's
that right?
correct.
That
Yes.
sounds cool. Just like
So
as a way
yeah,
to like visually represent, okay, we're talking about this thing now, and like this stuff's coming up. So we're this far through the process, and just that like an indicator like that on an individual slide that helps viewers understand like where they are and where you're going. That sounds super helpful.
yeah. I mean, actually, if you skip to the next slide, what we did was that we broke the presentation into 6 steps, which are these steps right here. And in the next slides, the timeline that I mentioned is on top, so it shows all of these icons on top of the presentation, and it shows you where you are. I mean, I know that's because I'm a software developer, but I'm used to create a lot of steppers
Mm-hmm.
and wizard like I guess processes, so I really like to let the audience know where they are, so I think that's
Yeah.
like really helpful. So yeah, I mean, we had all of these steps on the top, and then we went through each one of them, and in the end, we walked the audience through an example of how to actually put this into practice. So we also made like these icons very memorable, so that it was easy to follow.
Nice. That's really cool. I love that as kind of a organizing structure. The other thing that I wanted to point out too was how this slide here was cool in that you mentioned how like you used some imagery consistently throughout the presentation, and like the diamond is the example here, and how like the combo that I appreciate here is that like when you introduce a concept like valuation, you very clearly like have an icon associated with it and give a definition for it. So like as you go through a presentation, even if you're like addressing many different concepts throughout it, and maybe the most important ones up front, like when you introduce a new idea or a new concept, present it like with an icon and a definition as kind of like the first exposure to it. And then you can consistently use that icon in future parts of the presentation as a callback to that like concept that they're already at least a little bit familiar with, more familiar than they were at the beginning. And I think what that does, like as individual sketchnoters, I often talk about like the benefits of developing your own visual vocabulary, like icons that you're comfortable drawing and can weave into sketch notes really easily. But what you're doing here within a presentation is you're creating a common visual language for the folks in the room, that like you introduce that visual language and then you can refer to it later on in the presentation in a way that just is efficient, and I feel like you can do more complex things and represent more complex ideas when you like first break it down into those chunks, and each chunk has a visual with it. So I just thought that was really cool.
Yeah, and like I said, like in the beginning, I had no idea what he was talking about, and as I was building this, I had no idea how it was helping me understand it better, So
Mm.
it's funny how in the end I knew where I was, and I watched, I mean, what each concept meant, because I had done everything, So I also took it like an exercise for myself when I tried to learn something, and I think you speak about this a lot.
Yeah, that also reminds me of an episode of Sketchnote Breakdown, which is essentially what this is too, I guess, with Tanmai Vora. I don't know if you caught that one where he describes, he does a lot of sketchnoting of like business articles and books. And one of the things that he looks for when he's deciding what to sketchnote next, he described it as learning leverage. So if it was like
Okay.
a topic that he was unfamiliar with but wanted to learn more about, that's one of the ways that he decides what commission sketchnoting projects to take on. That's one part of his work is like folks who maybe like would pay him to sketchnote something, but he specifically looks for something, topics where he can learn something new about the subject matter while sketchnoting it. And I feel like that's what you just described. Obviously, in order to create a presentation that works, you need to understand the subject matter. So creating this helped you better understand these topics as well. Um, I'd love to hear what you have heard, I guess, from from your boss who's using this presentation to present it. And it sounds like maybe has used this presentation multiple times. Speak a little bit about the impact that this presentation style has had.
Of course, yeah. So he was invited in to this webinar, right? Like I mentioned, and while he was doing the webinar, someone texted him that there were like 650 or some like people connected, and the record for that company was 700 people connected at the same time. You know, so he was like, I mean, it was one of the most impactful presentations or webinars they have ever had.
Hmm.
And after that first presentation, he told me this, and then we fixed some slides, added some things. We also corrected some grammar mistakes, and then after that, he presented it again, and then after that, he was invited a third time and said it to me again. So we iterated,
Wow.
I think twice, and he has presented, I believe, 4 times now. So yeah, it had a really good impact. I mean, like I said, at first we had no idea how people was going to react to this format, especially because it was like people who are very used to seeing like very plain PowerPoint presentations with a lot of text, and it's more formal, you know. So yeah, I mean, I think it was a huge hit, and now I mean, next time that he's asked, I mean, we said that we were gonna do it again.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's awesome to hear. First of all, that this type of presentation resonated within an environment that's used to kind of more official looking or less doodly type presentations, because I think that is a fear for some folks who maybe want to do more drawn presentations but feel like the culture of that industry is going to reject it. I think in most cases, at least, that fear is probably not justified, and that it might even be specifically like those environments where more visuals, more doodles can do the most good in those maybe like technical or complex or these types of environments. So that was good to hear. I also wanted to point out the iteration piece was interesting to me, in that maybe particularly in today's environment where most presentations and workshops occur online, but probably, when people were doing in-person workshops too, uh, to have the opportunity to give a presentation more than once allows for that uh, small improvement, like each time you give that presentation again. Like you can give it once, see what worked, what didn't, make some tweaks here and there, give it again, make a few more improvements to the presentation. That's just a great way to refine what you're delivering. And in some ways, like I feel kind of envious of that, because the format that I tend to go through with like my YouTube videos, for example, I kind of like, do the best I can to make an engaging YouTube video, but I don't present that information in front of an audience 5 times before making that video. And maybe I should start doing that, because if I like, presented those ideas, those visuals 5 times, and then made the video about it to live on YouTube, that final video would probably be a lot better because of those rounds of feedback and improvement. So I think that's a cool way that you have approached
Man,
these
I actually envy
presentations.
your capacity of doing that, because I have tried to do like I think it's called graphic facilitation, and it's really hard, like I mean, this looks like simple sketches, but it takes me a lot of time to know what my layout is going to be, and I have to write things like 5 times because I have a terrible handwriting. So
Hmm.
yeah, it looks simple, but it takes time.
Yeah, that is true. And I can see, you know, based on the clarity and the clarity and the quality, I can tell that the creation of a presentation like this, like that a lot of thought went into it, and a lot of time working with the imagery and the text and the layout. Yeah, I feel like too that addressing those questions and exploring those questions of like what imagery to include, what text to include, what sort of a layout and diagram. I think the more you go through asking and answering those questions, the like hopefully the better and quicker you get at kind of plugging things in, so that the first time you create a presentation like this, takes hours and hours and hours. Maybe the 10th time you create a presentation like this, you can maybe cut that time in half, or a quarter or something like that. Um, which it sounds like you might have the opportunity to do if you do more collaborative presentations. Are there any others in the works already, or is it just something like that you're keeping an eye out for the future?
Not with him, but I mean, I do show. I mean, I do use them a lot with my team. To show a process and to show like a timeline of things when there's multiple teams involved. I mean, I try to do it very visual because I think it helps a lot. Like I recently described the process of all the teams involved in agile development
Hmm.
and what has to happen and how things are related. So yeah, I mean, I use it for myself all the time, but for others, this was the first time. Yeah.
Hmm. That's really cool. That's so awesome. Thank you for kind of breaking down the story behind that presentation, sharing a little bit about how you and your boss worked through what would go in it, and like the impact that it had. It sounds like it was a very positive experience. Is there anything else about that entire experience that you wanted to share, or that you feel like folks watching should know about?
Let's see. Yeah, I guess I mean one of the highlights was that I had never really applied this to learn something new. So I mean that was like a side effect that was like really helpful. Other thing was that I really developed a lot of imagery
Mm,
for this, and I didn't really have a lot for my visual, I guess, vocabulary at work. So that helped me add a lot of icons to my library, and that was also like
hmm,
a really cool thing. And I guess the last thing will be that even if you have a formal presentation, I mean, it doesn't have to be boring. I
hmm.
mean, it's proven that if it's visual, it's gonna have like more impact. So why don't just try it and do it?
I love that. And I think that's a great note to end on, maybe. So Miguel, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with
Thank you.
me and to share these ideas with others. And I hope that folks watching got something out of it. I encourage you to like take Miguel's ideas and what he did, steal any of those that you'd like, run with them, try them out yourself, and let us know how it goes if you end up creating your own presentation. And maybe, as Miguel, it sounds like, has done some presentations just on his own, sometimes obviously collaborating with someone else. I feel like there's so many times, like daily, when you have to communicate ideas with other people. Just like pick one here and there, create a visual for it, and use that as the method of sharing. And the more you do that, the better you'll get at it. You get to build your visual vocabulary along the way, as Miguel mentioned, learn things along the way. So there's a lot of great opportunities yeah, I encourage folks to just run with them. So Miguel, thank you once again. Love chatting with you.
Same. Look, thanks a lot, man.